What's up, man?
Okay, good, good. How you doing?
Hey, nice to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Big fan of your work, and I'm looking forward to getting into the latest album and kind of getting into the history of your career trajectory.
For
Um,
sure.
and, and before we do that, I want to know, 4 years ago, this pandemic began and really sent ripples through the music community. How did you survive that time period, and how good does it feel to be out with new material and performing live?
Well, I was right in the middle of a tour when everything went down. I was in Paris, and we were about to start a month-long tour. And 2 days into it, we were told we had to go home. Not sure we were even gonna be able to get home.
Yeah.
So I was still living in New York at the time. While I was there, my wife is like, I'm going back home. And we're from the Maryland, DC, Virginia area. I'm from Baltimore. My wife's from Virginia. She was
Okay.
like, I'm going home because at that time, New York was going crazy. Ambulances everywhere. A couple of people in our apartment building had passed away. So she went back to Virginia while I was in Paris. I came back. I was pleading her to come back up, but I ended up going back to going back down as well. And during that time, it was all uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to happen. And at that time, I didn't know if I was ever going to come back to New York or not. Which we ended up not coming back to New York, which was a life-changing thing for me, because I thought that was the place that everything happens, the place where all the dreams come true. And in a little bit of that capacity, it is true. That's where all of my heroes were. So we relocated to Baltimore. We bought a house down there. During that time, we were just trying to figure out what life was going to be. And for me as a musician, I had to transfer everything to online. I had to be able to um, present online as far as musically. I had to be able to teach lessons online as well, be a better communicator, figure out how I was going to continue to record music. So I had to get a home recording studio going. So everything had a shift, which and all of these things that I changed are still implemented right now in 2024. And now that we're out of it, it seems that work has been almost nonstop in that capacity. Um, and I think partially because of all the work that was done during the pandemic, to ensure that we were able to stay afloat.
Yeah. How do you pronounce your latest album? What's the right way to pronounce it?
Cacao,
Cacao. Okay, I wanted to make
right?
sure.
Like chocolate, right?
Okay,
Absolutely.
there you go. So I've really enjoyed this album. How did this come about? Was it a part of the pandemic? How did you
It
create
was.
this?
It was actually Cacao was the first song that I started writing during that period, um, and kind of took that song kind of shifted the way that I was composing. Right, it had more of a dance element to it because especially during that time, people needed to feel good.
Yeah.
And I wanted the music to be uplifting, and I also changed the way I composed in the manner where it went from not being pen to paper, but it was from my mind to a digital audio workstation like Logic. Right, that's what I was using. So I was writing everything right into the computer, right, and then recording saxophones into the computer, and then after that, I was taking the songs to the band. Right, so it represented a different way from a different creative process for me as well. Now, and that kind of shaped the way the rest of the tunes came about. The songs have a much sweeter sound than the previous album, which had snippets of it. But this one has a sense of this album has a sense of coolness. It has a sense of dance, and it has a sense of smoothness to it. Right, which is kind of the characteristic for the whole album.
Yeah. Take me back to the beginnings of your life. Where were you born and raised, and how these seeds of not only becoming a musician, but getting into jazz? How did all this start for you?
Well, I started playing saxophone when I was 10, but before that, my older brother, who's now still a professional musician, he was playing the trumpet at the time. He's 4 years older, and when I started, I wanted to play the trumpet. It was just logical, right?
Yeah.
I saw him doing it, so that was what I wanted to do. But my father quickly said, "No, you're going to play the saxophone," and I never turned back from there. So I started playing in the and when I was 10 years old. While in school, I was doing choir too. It was kind of the, if you did band, you did choir as well. So I went to a magnet middle school as well, where I was doing, music theory and stuff like that. Stuff that I didn't know I was going to need. I was just doing it because it was a part of school. I went to high school, and my high school was very much so a marching band driven school, right? So I was able to get that experience too, the performance side, the show side, which I had no idea how it was going to turn up in my career either. It was just a part of what we were doing. Um, and while I was there in high school, let's go back a little bit further. I was a very 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 shy kid growing up. To the point where when people see me perform now, they were like, "I didn't even know you talked." And it was kind of that way. And music for me was a a social lubricant, right? It helped me adjust to different situations, right? It was something that I knew I could do well, that could bring people together. So I used it in that capacity too. I saw that early on. Um, and that kind of motivated me to get better as well as my brother, because now my brother is 4 years ahead of me. So in school age, that's a huge difference. That's someone that's 4 years older than you can play light years around you, at that age. So I was constantly watching him and on his journey, and I was like, okay, this is probably the only thing I can do, and I dove in. At that time, I decided to go to school for music. I went to Howard University in Washington D.C., where I got my Bachelor of Music Education and my Master of Music in Jazz Studies. During that time, while I was at Howard, of course, I was in the jazz band. I was in the concert band. I was actually studying classical saxophone all through my undergrad. I was in the flute ensemble and all these other groups. I traveled for the first time out of the country, and this gave me a world view at that point, which was really important to get a world view, because having a world view lets you know that the way you're living isn't the only way that things are going, right. When my first trip was to Japan, and it was a different world when we got off of the plane. The way that people sat was different. The way that they walked across the street was different. And you have to adjust to other people's cultures, right, and respect their cultures, right. That gave me an early insight into that as well. After that, while I was getting my master's, I started teaching in District of Columbia Public Schools. I was teaching woodwinds, and this was the school that I was student teaching at. So I was getting mentored at the same time, while I was doing this, while I was developing an educational voice, because it takes a second to develop a voice in education as well. So I was doing that. I spent 3 years at Hardy Middle School in DC Public Schools, 2 years getting my master's, 1 year after. And then right after that, I knew the plan was to always go to New York, and this was my moment to go to New York. At that time, that was 2012. And I went up there and I did all of the things that you do when you're new. First of all, I was I was I was new, so I was coming up by myself, right? So I was going to all the sessions. I was going to Smalls. I was going to Fat Cat. I was going to the Smoke Jazz Club. I was going to the Village Underground. Just getting to know the people, getting to know the scene, and trying to um, trying to collaborate with my peers at that time. So I started getting work with some brass bands around town. I started getting some work with some of my friends at, of course, those clubs like Smalls and all these other places. And I started working with a singer named Cheryl Pepsi Riley too, whose mantra was "Trust your gift." Um, and that served me well, because in those sessions are where I met some of the movers and shakers in the music industry. At her sessions, like everybody would come to those jam sessions. Like Prince would come through, Queen Latifah. I mean, the who's who. It was every week. You never know. And in those sessions, I was able to harness my horn section skills, because it was a primarily R&B session. It wasn't a jazz session like the small sessions that I was used to. Right. So I had to learn how to play in a section. I had to learn how to play less, right? And to figure out where the moments were in the music. I had to figure out how to network, how to speak to people, right? And how to connect with people. So, one, I could create a real relationship, and so that people would want to know that it was okay to work with me. A lot of in the music industry, it's definitely about who you know, and if they want to work with you, if they want to be around you. So I learned a lot of those skills. And from 2012 to 2015, I was playing with a bunch of people, but my big break as far as being able to tour the world came in 2015, when I started touring with a singer, rapper named Lauryn Hill. And with Lauren Hill, I traveled. That it was once we started, it was like nonstop for about 3.5 years,
Wow.
traveling the world, almost every continent except Antarctica. We were all over. Um, Plane tours, bus tours, one-offs. I mean, we were doing. I've done stadiums with her. I've done the Montreux Jazz Fest with her. I mean, all of these. Uh, Places that I dreamed of being. And in an instant, all of it was happening consecutively,
Yeah.
right? So in 2018, well, let's go back before that. In that period, since it was so busy, I knew that I was gonna have to record an album, because I've heard friends and some of the people that I look up to. They say, man, sometimes when these tours start to take off, you have no time for what you came here for, for your own project. So about a year into myself touring with Lauren, I recorded my first project. Um, and it ended up being an amazing experience, because right after I stopped playing with her, I was like, "Oh man, what am I going to do now? What's going to happen?" And I have a project in the bank, and that's when I went straight forward, right into it. You know what I mean? And releasing the album, booking shows, and so forth. And that release was in about 2019 and to 2020, right? And of course, 2020 is when everything shut down.
Yeah.
um, and that's how we got to this present day project.
So what was the first live show that you ever saw that blew you away?
First live show, it was it was probably one of my brother's high school concerts.
Yeah.
You know, um, and these high school concerts, this jazz band concert, um, everybody in the band was soloing. Everybody had a show aspect. The drummer, during her drum solo, would start on the drum set and then would go all the way around the drum set, playing on the floor. The bass player had a sequence that he would play during his solos, right? And I saw everybody having moments on stage. I was like, man, I can't wait till I can do that, till I can get on stage and do that, and be on the other side of that. So those were probably my first experiences, when talking about live music, just because I was a younger sibling. you know
So being around a caliber musician like Lauryn Hill and even all of the other esteemed musicians and visionaries you've been around, and you've been around the world, what
Mhm.
have you gleaned from them that has made you a better educator to young players? What do you try to impart on young players you get around?
Well, one is to go directly to the people that are already doing it, all right, that have the insight that you don't have. right? That's the lesson that I learned. One that I learned from playing with Lauryn Hill is that she asked for exactly what she wants and she gets it, right? Most of the time, we don't ask for what we want. We will ask around what we want to appease the people, but she asked exactly what she needs and she gets it. And I think I saw that immediately, and I was like, okay, I think that that's an important skill,
Yeah.
right? And the same thing when it comes to mentors. Go straight for those people that are already doing it, you know, because they may have insight that you don't and can make the process a bit quicker. But even in that, you still have to go through the process because there are no skipped steps.
Yeah.
Um, don't be afraid of failure either. You know, that's the quickest way to get to the other side.
That's right. So let me ask you this, of all of these aspects that you've laid out about being a professional musician, what do you like the best? What gets you up every day? What motivates you?
I'm getting better. Having the opportunity to improve upon what I've already done, right, and to affect people more deeply, to touch people. Because for me, my goal, and it became even more clear after the pandemic, is to make people feel good, is to make people, to help people heal, right, whatever that process is for them, and to spread love and joy through the music, even if the music is sorrowful, right?
Yeah.
It's still we're still on a journey of healing, right? And I hope that my music can do that, and that's what I love to be able to do when people feel it, when they can smile, when they're listening to it, if they cry, you know what I mean? That means that my job was done, right?
So if you could go back in time and see one jazz show, one musician live, where are you going?
I'd probably go to see Miles Davis with Cannonball and John Coltrane. I would see that group
Yeah.
because for me they were my foundation, right? On all of them together seeing, I think that would be pretty amazing to be able to see them all in one place, you know. So that would be my dream.
Yeah. So why do you love jazz?
Well, I think it's a symbol of freedom, you know, and a symbol of peace, right? That's what it gives me when I'm playing it. The fact that you learn the rules, right, so you can break them, and that gives me a great sense of freedom as well, because we're working within a framework, and once you see what that framework is, you can see how to manipulate it. And then it becomes something all your own.
So everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I am a loud tea sipper. Uh, uh, I am. I hope that I'm compassionate. I am a student as well. I'm trying to get better at the things that I'm doing, at my weaknesses, personally, musically, right? Because I think they go hand in hand. Um, I think I am a healer, right, for myself, and if other people can get some of it too, I'm all for it.
So if anyone out there wants to, beyond streaming, they want to pick up your work physically, your albums, or see you live, where's the best place to go to figure all that out?
They can go to BrentBirckhead.com, and that last name is Birckhead. We have brand new music out, my brand new album Cacao. We have brand new music videos out. Let me see. I don't have the new one. The new one is behind me, but we have physical and we have digital, you know.
Yeah.
So
Right on.
BrentBirckhead.com.
Brent, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your story, your time. I love your work. Keep making the good jazz, man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, sir. And
Hey jazz fans, Joe Domino here, the host of the weekly Neon Jazz radio show and regular interview series being produced and distributed from Lee Summit, Missouri. We are quite excited to let you know about the first annual Lee Summit Jazz Fest taking place this summer on June 22nd, 2024 at the Bridge Space located at 210 Southwest Market Street. There will be 8 robust acts, including the Back Alley Brass Band and the great Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra. There will also be art vendors and food trucks to make this a must-attend event. All details can be found at www.bridgespace.us/jazz. We will see you there.